5 o'clock. And time for Wiregrass Strong. The new coronavirus epidemic is a big problem that's expected to become bigger in the weeks and months to come. For those who are infected as well as those trying to avoid infection, these are trying times. But amid all the doom and gloom, there are some positive stories, positive messages, and reasons to remain hopeful. So every afternoon at this time, your Wiregrass Radio family of stations will come together while staying apart to help you stay informed. We're going to be seeking your input. If you're a business impacted by the virus, call and let the Wiregrass know what you are doing to continue safely providing your services or goods. And if you're a parent working hard to take care of your family, we'd love to hear how you are coping. Remember, only the facts, no hearsay or rumors, and we're trying to keep things positive. Our number is 334-699-1053, or you can join us on YouTube Live, and you can chat throughout the program. Well, good afternoon. It is Wednesday, May the 6th. This is Wiregrass Strong. This half hour brought to you as a public service of Knights Record Service. 899-3257, big or small, they do it all. Give them a call, 899-3257, Knights Record Service. We're broadcasting live on all four of our radio stations, WESP, WECB, and WJRL Dothan, and WBBK Blakely Dothan. Also streaming live on Facebook at B1053 and on YouTube at Wiregrass Radio. And on the panel this afternoon is Amy Pollard. She is from the Pollard and Dave Morning Show, 6 a.m. weekday mornings on B1053. Good afternoon, Amy.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you, except it's a little bit brighter than it was this morning. It's great. Good to be here.
And also on our panel today, becoming a regular, Mr. Chris Mendheim from the
Cliff.
I'm sorry. That's
Cliff.
right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And
he's a
thank you,
regular.
that's right.
His name.
The third time would be the charm for you to remember Cliff and not Chris. That's great.
That's
I love
right.
it.
He is the chairman of the Dothan Area Chamber of Commerce, Cliff Mendheim. So proud to have you here this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me. We appreciate what you guys are doing and the fact that you do this show every day to get the information out there. And so thanks for having me.
Well, we have been doing the show now we're pushing 7 weeks. We've been on the air every afternoon at 5 o'clock. And here is a photo, screenshot of the very first Wiregrass Strong program. We didn't even have cameras. We just had little avatars up there, except for Squirrel. And Squirrel had his camera working that day, but not his microphone. So we've come a long way. We've actually got the cameras working. Dave and Amy Pollard do their morning show via this technology. And I think they're very comfortable with it.
Yeah, absolutely loving it. And I know we got a ton that we want to talk with Cliff about today. But first of all, I kind of wanted to update everybody on the latest Alabama numbers, because even myself, I've kind of not really been digging into the numbers as much as I had when we first got our shelter in place order. So just to kind of update you on our counties here locally in the state, we have 8,581 confirmed cases in the state of Alabama. We have 340 total deaths in the state of Alabama. And counties in specifics, Geneva County, we have 11. Coffee County topping the list with the most here locally at 136. Covington at 36. Dale County at 34. Henry County at 27, and Houston County at 99. And these are all according to the Alabama Public Health website. So, and then we have over 109,000 actually tested in the state of Alabama. So there you go, is a little update with the latest numbers for the state of Alabama. And it doesn't seem like, Cliff, we're seeing a whole lot of movement here locally with the numbers, although we have seen an increase in the testing. So I'm seeing that as a positive.
Absolutely. If I know that our governor has said that she's going to be a data-driven person when it comes to making these the decisions that she has to make. And so, if we can see our numbers hold steady or a decrease or just remain flat, that's going to be a positive for us being able to hopefully get back to a little normalcy, open our businesses fully back up with the new normal, whatever that new normal ends up being. So,
Right.
absolutely, that's very encouraging.
It's definitely going to be a different normal. I'll say that, and a new normal for a lot of people. But we were talking off camera about some of the anxiety that the anxiety seems to be growing just a tad as we have the businesses hold off just a little bit longer, being able to some open their doors at all, and then some that are still at a reduced capacity. And we were talking about how we totally can sympathize with these businesses. We know and we understand the worry, the anxiety that comes along with it, because those bills, they don't stop coming.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you're in business and you have expenses that you have to meet every month, if you don't have your doors open or you don't have any revenue coming in, it's going to be hard for you to sleep at night. It's going to be hard for you to do anything, function or anything at all. So the sooner we can get back to doing some business, even if it's a limited amount of business, the better to give all these businesses a chance to survive and maintain. Because we've talked about and said this before, small business is the backbone of our community and the lifeblood of everybody that is here together. So we certainly want to do everything we can to be safe. It's just such a fine line that you've got a needle that you have to thread between, safety in general and then business and economic viability at the same time.
Well, in your personal opinion, with the guidelines that the CDC is setting forward for these businesses, and even from the governor's office on the requirements of X number of customers being allowed in at one time, required wearing masks, whatever the things are that each business is doing, do you think that's enough?
Well, that's the grade A number one question. Is that enough? I mean, I've always thought and said that I think we should leave it to our businesses to comply with whatever requirements that the governor says we need to meet in order to do business. I believe that our businesses will do what's necessary to remain and stay within whatever guidelines the governor feels are necessary. Just give those businesses the chance to be able to do that, whether that's having masks and PPE or whatever may be required. I think the key is let's open that up and get it to a point to where we can have the businesses and those customers that are willing to come in and conduct business make the decisions on how they can keep themselves safe and happy.
Realistically, if you think about this, I'm of the opinion. I'm
I
not
lost
sure.
you.
Hello.
How about me, Cliff? Can you hear me?
I can't.
Okay.
Good, yep.
Okay.
All right, then you give it a try.
I got you. Good. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Sometimes when we flip screens back and forth, it kind of delays us, so that's fine. I was going to ask, I'm of the opinion, Cliff, that personally, I feel that COVID-19 is something that's going to be here to stay with us for quite some time, much like the flu is. One thing that we're seeing from a business standpoint that I've talked to multiple business owners, they're extremely concerned about is opening back up to the public and the amount of risk that you are assuming at this point by being a place that COVID-19 can be contracted by, whether it be employees or customers. And a lot of businesses are saying, okay, I see that you're going to open us back up here coming really soon, but that still doesn't take away the liability from me. And at first, I really didn't think about this from a liability standpoint for the businesses. How real is the liability that businesses assume when they if let's just say things stay as they are, there's no legislation or there's nothing to protect the business, things that stay as they are. How real is that liability for the business owner?
Well, I think liability is always a concern for any business that is conducting business. Then, on top of that, you get into a situation where we have to deal with the spread of a novel virus that we've never dealt with before. So, like you're saying, Amy, businesses might be hesitant or reluctant to open back up because of an increased liability risk that they may have.
Hmm.
So, as a result of that, our chamber has supported a local bill through our state legislature to actually limit liability to any potential customers or employees who may contract the virus in order to encourage businesses to actually go back and open their doors up when the time comes. Now, I think you know that I'm actually an attorney. I'm
Hmm.
serving as the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, the board of directors. So, just from a general standpoint, as an attorney, I'm always a little hesitant or reluctant when you're talking about a blanket shield of any kind of liability. However, in this situation, when you're talking about something we've never had to face before, ever in this area, I do think it is important that we do everything we can to support and encourage our businesses to shield them from any potential liabilities simply because they're trying to open their doors back up. The worst thing we could do is have a situation where they're able to go back to business, but they're scared or concerned about potential liability lawsuits as a result of people getting sick with this virus and whatnot. So we want to try to do what we can to help, and that our local Dothan Area Chamber of Commerce has thrown its support behind a bill at the state level to address that.
And I think that's so important. And when we talk about liability, naturally, we're talking about COVID-19 or pandemic, flu-like, or any type of illness that's spread much the way COVID-19 has. Not specifically about any other liability, but it is a real thing that business owners are saying, "Hey, I already know of multiple lawsuits that have been filed on behalf of employees or customers that have contracted, COVID-19 from their employment or whatever. And as a business owner, I don't know if I'd be willing to accept that risk. So until there is some sort of legislation, we may see some pushback from the business owners. And how likely is it, in your opinion, that something does get passed? Like, is the state of Alabama the only state that's really looking at it, or are we looking from a national, from maybe from the president standpoint, something coming down?
I
What do you
haven't
think?
personally heard, yeah, I have not heard personally of anything from a national level. I'm not saying it hadn't been discussed, just myself, I don't know of anything at this time.
Right.
That being said, I know that the bill that the chamber, our local chamber, has supported is specific for Alabama from our state legislative delegation. So that's all I'm currently aware of. I would imagine that there are multiple states that are at least contemplating the same idea or concern just because of the issues that are being brought up as we're trying to figure out the best and safest way to reopen our economy and all of our businesses again.
Well, I know this is going to sound kind of forthcoming, but if the businesses do open up or they're given the green light to go ahead and open up, how long could it be before we could actually see some legislation that could protect the business owner?
That's a good question. If I was a politician, I would be able to answer that better, but just a lowly attorney and a chairman of the chamber, I can't answer that. I would hope and imagine that most of the legislation that's being dealt with currently from the session when they're in session, I would hope and think that it's going to be related to the COVID-19 situation. And if that is in fact true and correct, then I would think it would be able to pass, assuming it could get enough support fairly quickly.
Well, this is definitely a subject, brother Ricky, that it's been on my radar for a couple of weeks now, and I I think it's something that needs to be put to the forefront. It's as important in my mind as getting the businesses open again, because, like we say, it's not going to do any good to open the businesses if the business owners aren't willing to step up and know that they're protected. So, hopefully, thank you for doing your part in helping to introduce that, because I know there's a lot of business owners that are going to breathe a sigh of relief if that actually does pass. It's needed. greatly for sure.
Absolutely. That's right. I
A
agree
lot,
completely.
a lot of what you're talking about right now, Chris and his team over at the Chamber of Commerce have made available on their website, which is probably one of the best clearinghouses of information. Let me remind you, this half hour brought to you as a service of Knight's Wrecker Service, big or small. They do it all, 899-3257. Thank you to Dwayne and Terry and all the folks over there at Knight's Wrecker Service. Your knight in shining armor. The Dothan Area Chamber of Commerce website is dothan.com, and I go there often, and there is one particular page that I wanted to hone in on today, and that was this one right here. This is your human resources page. If you happen to be a business owner and you have questions for the HR side of your business, much like what we've been talking about with Amy and Cliff this afternoon, this would be one great area to go to, and they have stockpiled a bunch of information with a bunch of links, all regarding your business, and whether it deals with unemployment claims, leave request, required posting information, updated congressional action, the Small Business Association loan information, the CARES Act is on there. Also, more informational links about the CARES Act and employment retention tax credits, just things you might not think about, but also things that your Paycheck Protection Program.
Which I did want to talk about that, Ricky, because Cliff, I know there are so many businesses out there that still have not, for whatever reason, maybe been delayed in gathering their documentation or, just not. I'm telling you, it was enough to make your head spin when you were first diving in and trying to get your share of the money for the PPP loan. And there's still businesses out there that haven't received any money or haven't applied. So is there still money available?
Yes, my understanding is that there is still PPP money, payroll protection program money, that is available. The SBA's EIDL loan program has currently been limited to agricultural only. And then also locally, we have the Dothan Houston County microloan program. So those are the three buckets of money that the Chamber of Commerce has been getting out to everyone and letting them know that that is available. Those are all still available at this point in time, with the sole exception of the SBA EIDL loan being limited to agriculture only.
Talk to me about the other one that you mentioned, the micro. Talk to me about
the micro loan. That is through the Southeast Alabama Regional Planning Commission. And my understanding is, I believe that you can ask for grants up to either $10,000 or possibly $20,000. And there's a smaller bucket of money that is available, and you can apply for that on the local level.
Okay, that's good to know as well. And with the PPP, that loan, I know a lot of business owners, some did take advantage of that, but it's still kind of unclear what is going to be required in order to have that your portion of that forgiven, if you will. What kind of documentation will actually have to be provided? Everybody, when you talk to a lot of bankers and you say, okay, 75% of this needs to be for payroll, utilities, rent. What am I going to need to provide in order to see to it? And they're still like, we still don't know. Do you have any insight on any of that information, Cliff?
Well, I heard it described that they were trying to fly the plane while they were still building it, and that there's a lot of truth in that. Unfortunately, it just didn't have a lot of time, like they typically would, to get the rules written prior to the program going into place. So my understanding on the PPP, as you mentioned, is that 75% of any money loaned has to be used for payroll, to keep your employees in position and paid. And there, you have to certify that because of the economic uncertainty, that the loan was actually needed by the business. The remaining 25% can be used for utilities, rent, mortgage interest payments, equipment payments. But you're exactly right. I've been reading just this week how the regulations are coming out and somewhat changing daily as to who could actually apply for the loan, how it would be applied. So it's still yet to be seen exactly, as you mentioned, what's going to be needed at the time that the forgiveness portion of the PPP loan comes into effect and businesses start to have to provide documentation and information. You know, what I would encourage and recommend anyone to do is to discuss with their accountant and their financial partner, lender, what they think and anticipate is going to be needed, and then that way keep documentation ready and available for when the time comes.
Absolutely. We have a comment here, Cliff. Someone asking, how could someone be able to sue over getting COVID when they get out on their own risk? And if they catch COVID, it's much like catching the flu or any other sickness. I guess he's basically wanting to know, how can there be a liability established there?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, as an attorney, I would tell you, you'll find people can sue people for anything they want to sue them for. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be successful with that lawsuit. But I think the concern just being based on the fact that everything was shut down and we're starting to reopen, we just want to make sure that the businesses are protected from any potential liability that might be out there.
Exactly. That's a great clarification there.
And that also includes employees. You're bringing employees back into an environmental, a work area where you have to protect yourself against the possibility of contracting COVID back in the workplace. So
I want to ask you about this too, Cliff, because this seems to be something that a lot of local business owners are talking to us about. And they're saying, because of what the state of Alabama has offered for unemployment, it has made it extremely difficult for some of these business owners to get their workers to come back in, because I'm sure you're familiar. I guess some of them are drawing $600-800 a week right now. And if I'm not mistaken, that might have been extended the other day. What was 8 weeks is now 6 months that they can actually draw that. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I'm not aware of the time frame myself either on exactly how long that's going to last. But what I do know is that if someone was laid off and they were receiving unemployment, and then the business calls them back to come back to work, and they choose to remain unemployed, then that will be reported by the business, and they're going to lose their unemployment. Okay. So I do know for a fact that was addressed, and that was something that our chamber locally worked on. Because we didn't want to de-incentivize any employees from working. Right. We want them to come back to work. And if they're making more money with unemployment as opposed to what they might have been making when they were working, that's going to create a problem long term. And so my understanding is that it was addressed in that way.
Ricky?
I was speaking with another member of the bar, and he had mentioned to me that those bonuses, those riders to the unemployment, that pushes it up to 800, perhaps, and some stipends up to 1,000. That's over in July. You'll be getting your normal benefits in July. That is the latest I have, and that is not corroborated, but I take it from a very good source. That I don't know about the 6 months unless that's something more recent, but I don't know how we could cope as employers. We can't. I can't compete with $1,000 a week.
No.
You know?
Yeah. What are you hearing, Cliff, from our local businesses that are opening up? Obviously, a lot of them are not at full capacity right now, but what kind of feedback are you getting from them? Is the community supporting the fact that they're able to open back up? What are we hearing locally?
Well, from what I've heard, businesses are ecstatic to be able to be open, even if it is from a retail standpoint at only 50%. I know that when I was out driving home during lunch on Friday up 231, it looked right there at Wiregrass Commons Mall in that area like the traffic you would see around Christmas time. I mean, there were people everywhere. So it looked to me that the community has responded positively even to a 50% occupancy opening for retail in a fantastic way. And I think even though you're limited, it's better to be open and limited than not open at all, I would hope. That's the hope and the prayer for what we've got going on currently right now. And I will say this too, Amy, that there have been ongoing discussions with the highest levels of our state government about the reopening of the remainder, our restaurants and everybody else that's still shut down, whether it's with the Lieutenant Governor's office, Joe Bonner. There are ongoing discussions about what it needs and what will be needed and what it will take to get those back open also.
Do you foresee the next, I guess, the next stage or the next phase with Governor Ivy? Do you think that she's pretty much going to relax most of the remaining businesses? What do you anticipate?
Well, I think it's going to depend on what the numbers do. If we
Right.
see a spike in the numbers, I mean, that could be devastating. If the
Right.
numbers continue to hold steady or they decrease, absolutely, then that's the next step and where we'll go from there. So again, the governor said from the very beginning, she's going to be data driven, and I believe it's going to be based on whatever that data says. And we can only hope that it's going to continue to remain how it has, either flat or no spikes and those kind of things.
What do you anticipate as far as the school year going? I know we've had some officials on with us, but what are you anticipating as far as looking down the road for the next school year?
I really don't have any idea. I'm a huge football fan.
Yeah, that's where I'm going to.
I don't see us being able to play football if we can't go back to school. So
Right.
I think to start playing football, we need to get back to school to begin with. But it's my hope that by the time we get to September, it's my understanding that school is done for this year, and then we're looking towards the fall. So
Right.
again, just remaining hopeful that we'll be able to get back to quote normal. I've heard what the president has said that just generally speaking, the virus does not affect children, which is obviously a positive or from a percentage standpoint.
Right.
If that's the case and that remains and stays true, then maybe that'll factor into being able to open the schools back up because, whether it's schools or businesses or professional sports, any small steps we can take to getting back to somewhat of a normalcy, it's just going to be a huge boost in the morale of everyone involved in our entire country.
Absolutely.
We have a comment here from Cheryl says, when you say 50%, is that 50% customer or employees? I want to speak on that from what I know. The businesses, as far as employees go, as long as they can socially distance and stay 6 feet, and if they need to wear masks and things of that nature, they can bring back all the employees as long as they can maintain that social distance. As for the 50%, speaking with a business owner last week we had on in our retail roundtable, they said that it was going by the fire marshal's code for occupancy in that business. And in her case, with all the square footage they had, even at 50%, I think 100% occupancy was 350 some odd customers. 50% of that, you're looking at 175 folks in her store. She said she'd love to see 175.
Right.
So at 50%, a lot of business can still get done and get done safely. And I want to add to that my disdain to our listeners who are not wearing masks when you go out. If you're not, if you don't care that much about your own health, at least be considerate of mine. If I'm going to wear that mask out there, please do the same. It's such a small thing to do. And once you get to the parking lot, you can take it off and breathe freely again. But that is the one thing that I notice the most in our dealings every day when you try to go to either a convenience store or a large box store. Wear your mask. Get your. I know it's only a suggestion. It's not a law, but wear your mask. One more thing I wanted to touch on was Cliff was pushing on his website, the chairman of the Dothan Area Chamber of Commerce, for the love of Dothan, please do the census. You want to say a few words about that, Cliff?
Absolutely. Thank you for even mentioning that. I know I've brought it up the last couple times that I was on here with you guys. We just really are pushing from the chamber standpoint and encouraging everyone to complete their census. It's so important from a representation standpoint. The response will directly determine whether or not we continue to have congressional representation directly from our area.
Mhm.
Also, from a money standpoint, the federal funding that comes back to this area for roads and bridges and school lunches and just a number of different things is all tied to the census. I know our numbers last year, or I'm sorry, 10 years ago were, I believe, in the 73% range. The governor has pushed for a 90% response rate, and I believe we were somewhere in the mid 50s as of last week. So we've got a long way to go. Now, they did extend the timelines on that, obviously, with everything we've been facing. But if you have not completed your census, it makes a huge difference in the money coming back to our community. And so we want to make sure that everybody's aware of that and knows to do it.
Why do you think that people are so, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. Why do you think that people are so reluctant to actually fill those out?
Well, specifically for this year, I would assume that the response rate is down because we've been just not out and being able to push it and promote it and just have our normal everyday lives. Just from a general standpoint, I think there's just a lot of distrust of the government, just in general, asking questions and privacy issues. And that's one thing that people need to understand. This is all basically kept confidential and only used for census purposes, and that's it.
Well, I'm going to ask y'all please do fill yours out. I've already filled mine out. I do want to say, I'm going to ask you this question. It seems to be a touchy subject with a lot of people, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this about looking forward to the fall and a possibility of having an additional outbreak, if you will, of the COVID-19, and looking forward to possible vaccinations or getting a vaccine for this. What are your thoughts on the what some of the people are talking about now, having the mass vaccinations? What are your personal thoughts on that?
Just whether or not the vaccination would be good, is that the question?
That, and I know that the vaccination obviously would be good, especially for those that have other comorbidities and things of that nature. But
sure,
there are some of the Bill Gates out there that are pushing no more large gatherings, period, until we have some mass vaccinations. I know you've probably seen some of that in the news. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, what I would prefer, and again, it's hard to say, but there's always a concern about a second outbreak. I mean, if you're a student of history like I am, back when the Spanish flu came, there was a second outbreak that was much worse than the first. So what I would hope and like to see is that we take the time we have now to stockpile our PPE. We get our masks, we have everything in place that we need if something like that happens. And we continue to abide by as much social distancing as we can. But again, it's going to be numbers driven. So if we see that the numbers that there hadn't been a second outbreak and the numbers are declining and people are comfortable gathering, going to football games, you name it, whatever you want to do, then I'd be all for it. But all of a sudden, if we see a second outbreak and it's more devastating than what we've seen, then I think people would have to take that into account and take it a lot more seriously. But for me personally, I want to make sure I have all of what I need now. And if I don't, I want to try to find it, which brings me to another good point. The chamber is also compiling a list of all of the suppliers for anything that a business might need and who could supply that. So we're at a survey that went out and currently working on that to be able to get out to our businesses and members also coming
You're meaning
up.
things like you're talking about, like sanitizer or mask, or you're talking about those things?
Face masks, face shields, goggles. I mean, anything at all that you might need or a business might need, depending on what they're doing. We want to make sure that those resources are available, whether it's PPE supplies, cleaning and disinfecting supplies, services and solutions, just anything at all that might be benefit to a business in this time of dealing with this virus.
Very good. That's awesome.
Well, we were blindsided by this as a world, we were blindsided by this, and we've had a chance now to examine it and start flattening the curve. But you're right. Now is the time to learn the lessons and stockpile those things that we need. And I believe on the website, you can go over there, and that's that PPE survey he's talking about. It's a great website. Let me just touch on that once again. It's the Dothan Area Chamber of Commerce website, coronavirus update, information and resources. And it's probably one of the best websites out there. And my hats off to you and the team over there, Cliff, for putting that together and keeping it updated. Folks, go visit that website, and you'll find a lot of very useful information there. And also complete your census. It's easy to do online. Also, absentee ballot, if you're looking to vote, if you're going to vote in the July 14th primary election, primary runoff, you need to go ahead and sign up for absentee balloting. Cliff, we want to thank you for being with us today. Cliff is the chairman of the Dothan Area Chamber of Commerce, and we are always happy to have him on board because we always have such an informative show when you're here, Cliff. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. Yeah. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Brother Ricky. Appreciate it. And like you said, visit our website, dothan.com. Like us on Facebook. And even if you have any questions at all, call the chamber 792-5138. We greatly appreciate being here on you.
Thank you so much.
Cliff Mendheim, the chairman of the Dothan Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much. Amy Pollard, tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. for a Thursday morning edition of, and if you missed this morning.
Oh my gosh. Let me just touch on it real quick. For those who missed it, my morning show partner showed up to do a morning show with no glasses, so he could not see anything on the screen. Also left his cell phone at home, so he couldn't call anybody. But then I suggested using the studio phone to call somebody. He couldn't use that to call his wife or his son because he doesn't know their phone numbers. Who doesn't know their spouse's cell phone number?
I know my wife's cell phone number, but I couldn't call my son's if I needed to. I'd have
technology has ruined us. I'm telling you, it was a hot mess from the moment we got in there this morning, but a lot of fun for sure.
And touch on the giveaway coming up Friday for the Friday Free for All and the Pepsi Gulf Coast Jam.
Of course, we are your exclusive Pepsi Gulf Coast Jam radio station and the only place that you can win tickets. We've got a pair of VIP pit passes that are worth over $800 for the pair that we're giving away Friday morning. All you're going to have to do is join in on our live stream and share it. Tag 3 of your friends, and you're going to be in the running. And at the end of our show Friday morning, we are giving away those $800 tickets. They're 3-day passes in the pits, VIP passes for Pepsi Gulf Coast Jam. You don't want to miss it. So make sure you're going to get your little share button ready to go. And then, of course, Friday morning, we are also giving away our Mother's Day, Mom's Day Out promotion from our friends at Glass Doctor, Dothan Blowpipe, and Massage Envy. If you are in the running, good. Make sure you're there Friday morning when we do the drawing. If not, tomorrow will be your last day to get qualified when you hear the sounder be caller 15, and you'll be in the running as well.
How about that? Some exciting stuff. Pollard and Dave in the morning on B1053, 6 a.m. until. And speaking of the questions that came up in today's show, tomorrow on this very program, David Sewell, the superintendent of Houston County Schools, will be here to talk about possible graduation.
Oh, yeah.
And the 2020-2021 school year. So you don't want to miss that show. That's going to be a good one. David Sewell tomorrow. Amy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Love you guys.
All right. We are streaming live on Facebook, B1053, and YouTube, Wiregrass Radio. This half hour brought to you as a service of Knight's Wrecker Service. Big or small, they do it all. 899-3257. Give them a call. They're great folks, and they'll help you out. And we'll be back on here tomorrow at 5 o'clock with Wiregrass Strong. Until then, stay strong, Wiregrass. We're going to get through this. Right now, we're going to return you to normal programming.